Right then, Balaban and the Border Legals. At the moment, there's no vocals. There should be a next week to finish them off. But if I show what this is like at the moment, what we've got is three tracks. So this one's called Conglomerate, this one was called Reflection, this one's called Bleeder. First one is Conglomerate, again when they rehearsed before I recorded, so I just left it recording. So it's going to be like a demo track for them in the end. Just show you some of the things that happen in here. So kit, this is the sort of tracks I've got at the moment. D1-2, which is the bass drum. There is a second one, which is the sub kick, which I haven't used in. Snare, you got the top and the bottom. Different versions of the snares for the other two songs. Toms are only ever used in Bleeder, so they got muted out for pretty much most of it. In fact, that should be muted out as well. Overheads, I have got a hi-hat and a ride mic, but at the moment I've chosen not to use them because it's ample enough about them. And I've also got a room mic, sorry. I was just capturing the drum kit, placed a pile up in the ceiling. I'm very, very quietly, was just getting a bit more impact on the shells with that one. Bass, 5 things in total. Again, D1 and 2 on a cabinet and sub kick. I also did use a ribbon microphone, but I didn't choose to use it in the end because I thought it was a bit too full with that one. There's also 2 DIs. Normal DI is basically the DI, as it will be, and the other one, which I nicknamed the Meek one, is DI going into a Joe Meek unit, so it's got a bit of compression EQ on it instead of coming in without anything. Sounds a lot punchier. Works on some songs, works on not others, which is why I DI'd both. Guitar, about 4 different mics I used on the guitar. Got a Sennheiser SE1, about 6-7 foot away, it was a nice clean sound, a little bit of reverb. Got SM57s right with the cab, so nice direct sound. Again, also different sort of EQ mixes for different songs. I also got an NT1 and NT1A, and I spaced at different intervals. The NT1 was the furthest I could in the room. It's about 15, 20 foot away from the amp, something like that, for a bit more of a distant sort of sound. I only ever used it in one or 2 places in the end. LDC, SDC, long diaphragm condenser, short diaphragm condenser, sorry, for the acoustic guitar on Bleeder. So a nice body sound and a nice neck sound, basically. Old just shows us some of the tracks I've had and not used, just to give you an idea. I do capture a lot of things when I record. Reality is nearly all of them don't get used, so I've still got the vocal guide kind of kicking around the moment, muted. And obviously you can see what I've gone through, what I've muted out, what I don't like. So obviously it's got a lot of channels. And also if you notice I've got everything on one file at the moment. That will change and split to them once I've got the vocals, because one, there's a lot going on here. It's hard to see. The reality is on 58 tracks. When I put the vocals in, I'm probably going to max out Cubase, I would have thought. So I will need to split separate tracks. So it will be 4 separate files probably next week once I've got the vocals. Yeah, let's have a little listen to what a bit of it sounds like, shall we? So if we zoom back in, and we'll start from, let's say, around about there. This is Conglomerate. The effects on your hearing here is actually in the bass, so I had to record the bass twice for some songs. Just fast forward a little bit to show what the kit looks like. Just the kit on its own, to give you an idea. Back of the song. Just show what some of those bits on the kick look like. So if we start with, say, the snare, so we've got the top snare, we've got underneath the snare, that was a 57, that was a C1000 up underneath there. Some of the plugins, which I know I'll probably get asked about, we've got an SSL emulation of an SSL mixer. I do use that sometimes for the EQ and the compression. Trigger, which is Slate Trigger 2. Sometimes I use it for kit replacement, sorry. On this particular track, I've used a bit of it on the bass drum because the sub kick didn't come out as great as I wanted. I've got mixed instruments on this one, but it's actually a sample of the actual snare. If I just play a bit of it, so that's the bottom snare on its own. If I turn trigger off altogether, you should hear it's going to be the same sound if I put it back to that. But that's still the same sound. The reason I've used trigger on this one, 2 reasons. I always generally use trigger on shells for the gate more than anything. When you look at it, you can see the waveform, which I think is really, really good. So you can see when it ends, and I think it's a good gate compared to a lot of others I've used. But I've used the actual sample replacement on this one because and the drummer's hitting on conglomerates, it's not a consistent hit. Sometimes he was quieter in the verses, he was louder in the choruses, and it changed the way the snare sounds a lot, I was struggling to get. So what I did was I've got obviously one snare hit I really liked. I exported it, I threw it in Trigger, so it is sampling the same snare, but it's just a consistent hit every time. If I go into my samples, and there it is. So I threw it in on the library. So I used it for that. I did use a little bit of it on the bass drum as well. If I just go to the bass drum, because I wasn't happy, because I've used the 100% on this one. I wasn't happy about the beat sound I got, so I've used a kit replacement for that in the end. Snare otherwise is as it is. The toms have got a little bit in it as well. If I go back to that chainsaw, obviously I've got an emulation of SSL, I've used Trigger. Compression wise, just show you a bit of compression how it's going. Also got a fair bit of compression going on that snare drum. EQ, a little bit of reverb, so I'm using a plate reverb. I'm using actually Abbey Road one from Waves for this particular track. I'll go through some of the other bits. Obviously, like I said, I've got same snare for all 3 tracks, but obviously different ways of EQing and different ways of compressing them, different reverbs to suit the different songs. If I put some other bits on there, so if I put the overheads on the row. The overheads in particular, I haven't compressed a lot. I've kept it as shallow as I can. Just love it. More than anything, just to try and tame the snare hit, really. And what I've done instead, because this is a vocal rider, so rather than me staying with the fader, constantly moving them back, I've got an automation going on, so when the cymbals are louder, it pulls them down, and the quiet pulls them, and that kind of replaced the need for compression. Because compression would do that, but it would also add extra resonance to the cymbals. It might bring more parts of the hits. When it's the hits, the cymbals I don't necessarily want for the track. So I wanted that original sort of flavour, and then I have used a little bit of reverb in this as well. I've actually used Cubase's stock reverb for the cymbals here. So it's bits, like I said, the spots, the hi-hat, the ride, I've got them muted. I'm not going to use them because I felt that they don't really bring anything to the track, to be awfully honest. Toms, if I show you some toms, like I said, the drummer only used them in 1 track. So just show you a bit of bleeder before we actually go into it, though, because we've got other bits and bobs to show you on this one. Acoustic guitar might be a nice thing to hear for this one. Let's go right down and show you where that is. Start to make here. So I've got a nice body sound, neck sound, blending together. No reverb on the body whatsoever. A little bit on the neck, because I think it needs to be a bit more of a direct sound. This song, if it was too reverb, I think it might get washed out. 7 on that guitar. I've used an SE1 for the 11%. This one's a 40% because the guitar originally, if I turn the plugins off, has that effect on it on the original recording. It's not something I've actually added in. So I've just literally compressed it, tinted it, I've put a bit of EQ, and I've just put a rider on, a vocal rider on it. Toms, let's show you these toms anyway. So that toms are about here. So a nice clean tom sound, a little bit of reinforcement with them, gating as well. Other things about the room mic, very, very quiet on everything. Probably the point where you can't even hear it, but originally that's what I got from it. What I've done with it is I've very heavily compressed it. I've took a lot of top end, like bottom end, a little bit in the middle end there, just to give it. I'm more concerned about the actual hits of the shells, that sort of impact sort of sound, the attack. And then I've got it very quietly in the mix. In fact, you can possibly hear it with the naked eye, with your ear, sorry, not naked eye. But if I have it too loud, obviously, because I'm compressing that much, the cymbals get the compression, obviously I don't want that to replace the overheads. So I've showed you a little bit of kit, I've showed you a bit of guitar. Bass is one I haven't talked about too much. I've said what mics I used. I have done different choices for every song. I might show you a bit of bleeder, because that's the one, not bleeder, sorry, reflection, which is It's another reason I need to split it to 4 tracks, which is here. This one, because on this one, I thought it's a bit more of a rock song, this one, so I've used more distortion on this bass compared to 4 tracks. show you this is a sub kick, homemade one. It's a Yamaha HS7 speaker. I've ripped over a broken monitor, put in a drum shell, rigged up on a stand. I think it works quite nice. Catches just lots of low end. It can work really good on bass guitars, I've discovered. Drum kits, it can work if the actual bass drum doesn't seem to get enough from the beat to sound if I have a mic inside, so I do use them as well. On this recording, it didn't benefit, so I threw it into the discarded part. That's a D112 on the cabinet sound. No DI on this one. Didn't feel like it needed it, so just put it back in. Yep. Like I said, the bass, different choices every song. So first one, I've used the same mics for the first two songs. Difference is the distortion on the sub kick compared to the first. Third one, I decided to use one of the DIs instead. So DI sound, obviously DI, what I normally do is I have used a little bit of emulation on it. So this Crystal Algae model for waves. Again, I've got quite a fair few wave plugins here, you see. And I've used that originally, sounded like that. Just a very nice bright DI plugin, really. If I show you what the Joe Meat one looks like, sometimes it works really well, sometimes I think it's a bit too much for songs. But I could just find it kicking around here somewhere. It might actually be in the bass folder still, looking at it. No, I think I deleted it at the file actually to make space. But I do use a Joe Meat one sometimes in some of the tracks. But like I said, it's got a lot of compression, a lot of EQ because you do it on the actual plugin feeding into the computer. It gives a very pumpy sound compared. It can be really good for dance stuff, I suppose. It's good for 90s rock more than anything, I think. But I didn't think it suited this song. Okay, so that's kind of everything. I know I've just kind of scanned little bits and bobs here and there. They'll do the vocals next week. They'll release it. So obviously, if you want to see more of the song properly, I'm sure that Balaban and the Border Legals will release it to you very soon.